You feel the heat rising in your chest like a sudden suffocating tide. An email sits glaring on your glowing screen. A blatant insult disguised as professional feedback, or perhaps it is the sound of a driver cutting you off, their horn blaring aggressively in the driving rain. Your pulse hammers a frantic heavy rhythm against your ribs. Your jaw clenches, the muscles in your neck pulling tight like industrial cables, and your hands unconsciously ball into rigid fists. Deep inside the primitive architecture of your brain, the amygdala fires its desperate warning signals, flooding your bloodstream with cortisol and adrenaline. Your autonomic nervous system cannot distinguish between the physical threat of a prowling predator and the psychological menace of a bruised ego. Your body is preparing for a physical war that does not exist, urging you to lash out, to type the furious reply, to scream back, to defend your fragile identity at all costs. You are standing on the precipice of a reaction, about to surrender your sovereign mind to a fleeting chemical rush. The modern world has deliberately conditioned you to believe that you must respond instantly to every single provocation. You are surrounded by highly engineered traps, algorithms, and outrage cycles designed to hijack your attention and keep you in a perpetual state of alarm. They want you arguing in the comment sections, defending your ego against faceless strangers, bleeding out your vital energy into a bottomless digital void. But you must realize that this immediate automatic reaction is a form of self-imposed slavery. The ancient philosophers understood that the initial shock to your nervous system is entirely natural and biological. They called these early warning signs the first movements of the soul. You cannot stop the sudden flush of your cheeks, the quickening of your breath, or the involuntary flinch when struck by unexpected adversity. But the ancients drew a harsh, unforgiving boundary right after that physical reflex. The pounding heart is biology, but the decision to throw your emotional weight into anger is a voluntary choice. To master your emotions, you must discover the hidden sanctuary located in the microscopic fraction of a second before you react. Between the stimulus and your response, there is a space, and in that infinite gap lies your power to choose, your growth, and your ultimate freedom. This gap is your inner citadel. When the impulse to retaliate arises, or when the craving to prove someone wrong washes over you, you do not automatically surrender. You catch the impression before it takes root in your mind, and you brutally force yourself to pause. You act as a strict, heavily armed guard at the gates of your own consciousness. When a harsh impression knocks, demanding entry and demanding a reaction, you tell it to wait. You say to the feeling that it is just an appearance and not at all the thing it claims to represent. You hold the distressing thought at arm's length and interrogate it with absolute cold precision. You strip away the emotional narrative and practice the art of objective physical definition. You realize that the terrifying insult is nothing but vibrations of air moving through a room or pixels illuminated on a glass screen. It is a sequence of words arranged by another flawed, struggling human being. By decomposing the objects of your frustration into their barest, most objective physical components, you completely drain them of their hallucinatory power. You must aggressively strip away the emotional storytelling and stick only to the unvarnished reality. If you are not relentlessly vigilant, your mind will automatically add a toxic layer of suffering to a simple, neutral fact. The objective fact is that someone insulted you. The toxic voluntary addition is the belief that you must be universally respected in order to have worth. You cannot control the external events that happen to you, but you possess absolute authority over your judgment of them. Knowing the philosophical theory is entirely useless if you do not carry your wisdom onto the battlefield of your daily life. You must establish a rigid protocol for those terrifying moments when the world tries to drag you down into its noise. The greatest cure for anger is delay. Do not trust yourself in the intoxicating grip of a fresh emotion. You choose the uncomfortable silence over the easy distraction of lashing out. You count to 10. You take a walk around the building. You excuse yourself from the room. You force a wedge of time between the stimulus and your response, starving the overgrown neural pathways of instant gratification and waiting patiently until the muddy waters of your soul settle and become perfectly clear again. Every time you successfully ignore the bait, you are physically rewiring your brain for resilience. You are stepping out of the reactive fear-driven survival mode and ascending into the deliberate, focused state of creation. As you navigate your workplace or your family gatherings armed with this new restraint, you will inevitably encounter difficult, frustrating people who will test your patience to its absolute limits. You will face narcissists, chronic complainers, and those who thrive on generating conflict. They will act out of selfishness and ignorance, desperate to drag you down into their chaotic reality so they do not have to suffer alone. When this happens, your silence becomes an impenetrable, gleaming shield. You do not retaliate, and you do not return their anger with more anger. You remember that getting angry at an ignorant person is like getting angry at a blind person for stepping on your foot. They are stumbling through the dark, lashed by their own unexamined passions, acting involuntarily under the mistaken belief that their toxic behavior will bring them peace. Your hatred instantly dissolves into a fierce, aching compassion for their terrible blindness. To survive this relentless onslaught and protect your hard-won silence, you must take a mental blade and cleave your world cleanly in two. On the outside of that harsh boundary lies everything that you cannot completely command, including the global news cycle, the sudden fluctuations of the economy, the traffic, and the unpredictable behavior of the people you work with. Throwing your emotional weight against these immovable objects will only leave you exhausted and miserable. On the inside of that boundary lies the only territory you truly own, which consists of your choices, your judgments, your impulses, and your character. When you stop trying to manipulate the external variables of your life, you retreat to the only domain where you have absolute power. You realize that no one can make you do wrong, and no one can force you to surrender your peace without your explicit consent. Look at the frantic talkers and chronic reactors around you and realize how little they actually own. They are slaves to the opinions of the mob, slaves to their own unchecked impulses, and slaves to the fleeting high of being noticed. You are no longer a puppet jerked around by invisible strings. You step back into the blinding rush of the world, fully engaged, but fundamentally detached from the chaotic outcomes. You aim your bow, you account for the wind, and you release the arrow with perfect precision, but you do not attach your emotional survival to whether it strikes the dead center of the target. Take a deep breath, hold it in your lungs, and let your tightly clenched fists fall open. Release the burning need to react. Step out of the illusion of the crisis and stand firmly in the raw, beautiful truth of the present moment. You are free. Yet this profound freedom you have just claimed is not a permanent state magically granted by a single moment of clarity. It is a fragile, embattled territory that you must aggressively and intentionally defend every single day of your life. You step out of the quiet sanctuary of your morning reflection, and immediately the modern machinery of distraction and outrage launches its relentless assault on your senses. The small glass device in your pocket vibrates with synthetic urgency, demanding that you surrender your sovereign attention to a glowing screen. You are surrounded by highly engineered traps, algorithms designed by thousands of brilliant engineers whose sole purpose is to hijack the primitive architecture of your brain and flood your nervous system with cheap dopamine. The culture insists that you must have a loud opinion on every passing political scandal, that you must broadcast your every mundane achievement, and that you must constantly perform your existence for an invisible audience of equally distracted people. It is a world that profits off your anxiety and feeds on your constant need to control your image. They want you arguing in the comment sections, defending your fragile ego against faceless strangers, pouring your vital life force into a bottomless digital void. This is the new slavery, a self-imposed servitude to convenience and validation, where the bars of the cage are forged from endless notifications and the desperate gnawing hunger for external approval. To survive this relentless onslaught and protect your hard-won silence, you must deploy the most brutal and effective weapon in the philosophical arsenal. You must apply the dichotomy of control with ruthless surgical precision. You look at the chaotic, noisy landscape of your daily life, and you cleave it cleanly into two separate realms. On the outside of that harsh boundary lies everything that you cannot completely command, including the global news cycle, the sudden fluctuations of the economy, the algorithms designed to addict you, the opinions of your peers, and the toxic, unpredictable behavior of the people you work with. You understand that throwing your emotional weight against these immovable objects will only leave you exhausted and miserable, effectively handing the keys of your inner citadel directly to the enemy. On the inside of that boundary lies the only territory you truly own, which consists of your choices, your judgments, your impulses, and your character. When the phone chimes, the physical sound is an external event completely outside your power. But the automatic belief that you must immediately look at it, the judgment that whatever lies behind that screen is urgently important. That is entirely your own creation. Between the stimulus of the modern world and your response to it, there is a space, and in that sacred infinite space lies your ultimate freedom to choose. This is where the battle for your sovereignty is actually fought and won, right in the microscopic fraction of a second before you react. When the impulse to distract yourself arises, or when the craving to prove someone wrong online washes over you, you do not automatically surrender. You practice the discipline of assent. You catch the impression before it takes root in your nervous system, and you force yourself to pause. You hold the distressing thought, or the seductive desire at arm's length, and you interrogate it with absolute cold precision. You strip away the emotional narrative and practice the art of objective physical definition. You realize that the terrifying email from your boss is nothing but pixels illuminated on a glass screen. It is a sequence of letters arranged by another flawed, struggling human being. It cannot actually touch your soul. That inflammatory headline is not a call to righteous action, but a manipulation tactic designed to harvest your attention and sell advertising. By decomposing the objects of your fear and desire into their barest, most objective physical components, you drain them of their hallucinatory power. You choose the uncomfortable silence over the easy distraction. You practice the fierce discipline of delayed gratification, starving the overgrown neural pathways of instant reward and reinforcing the networks of your rational highest self. To maintain this level of awareness requires an exhausting but necessary dedication. You do not sleepwalk through your day, reacting blindly to whatever crosses your path. You walk with deliberate intention, fully inhabiting every action you take. Inevitably, your quiet dedication and refusal to participate in the drama will provoke those who are still trapped in the noise. As you navigate your workplace, your family gatherings, or your community, you will encounter difficult, frustrating people who will test your patience to its absolute limits. You will face the narcissists, the chronic complainers, the gossips, and those who thrive on generating conflict. They will act out of selfishness, arrogance, and ignorance, desperate to drag you down into their chaotic reality so they do not have to suffer alone. When this happens, your silence becomes an impenetrable, gleaming shield. You do not retaliate, and you do not return their anger with more anger. You realize that getting angry at an ignorant person is like getting angry at a blind person for stepping on your foot. You remember that they are acting involuntarily, driven by mistaken beliefs about what is truly good in life, stumbling in the dark while lashed by their own unexamined passions. Instead of hatred, Your judgment of them dissolves into a fierce and aching compassion for their blindness. You stand firm like a massive stone promontory against which the waves constantly break. The water roars and foams in a deafening frenzy, but the rock stands absolutely still, and eventually the fury of the water settles around its base. You remain perfectly calm, refusing to let their dysfunction become your dysfunction. Because you do not squander your energy on idle chatter, petty conflicts, or performative outrage, you discover that you have an immense overflowing reservoir of strength left for what actually matters. You redirect your newly liberated energy toward the only pursuit that possesses intrinsic value, which is the cultivation of your own character and the execution of your life's work. You recognize that wealth, fame, digital followers, and public applause are fundamentally indifferent, neither good nor bad in themselves, but merely raw materials that can be swept away by fortune in an instant. So you stop talking about what you are going to do, you stop posting updates about your grand ambitions, and you simply sit down and do the actual work. You realize that talk drains the energy desperately needed to conquer the tasks in front of you. Doing great work is a grueling, lonely struggle, but you do your job brick by boring brick without needing a parade, a pat on the back, or a viral post to validate your effort. You enter a state of deep, unforced flow where the relentless chatter of your ego goes entirely silent, and action and awareness merge into a single, seamless stream of being. You subsume your ego to the larger mission, finding ways to clear the path for others, knowing that the person who clears the path ultimately controls its direction. And when the day is finally done, when the glowing screens are turned off, the emails are answered, and the world goes completely quiet, you sit with yourself in the stillness. You do not flee from the silence by turning on a television or pouring a drink, but you sink deeply and courageously into it. You review your actions with the uncompromising honesty of a strict but loving coach. You ask yourself the hard, uncomfortable questions of the ancient philosophical evening meditation. Where did I let my attention slip today? When did I allow a sudden emotion to hijack my reason and cause me to snap at a colleague? What duty to myself or to my fellow human beings did I leave undone because I was too afraid or too tired? You do not do this to punish yourself or to drown in useless regret over an unchangeable past, but to bring the searing, purifying light of awareness to your own unconscious programs. You forgive yourself for the times you fell short, because you are a flawed human being, and perfection is an impossible, paralyzing illusion. But you resolve with absolute iron determination to be better the next time the sun rises. You look at the vast expanse of cosmic history and see how brief your part in it really is, realizing that soon enough, you and everyone you know will be reduced to smoke and dust. This meditation on your own mortality does not depress you, but rather it awakens you violently and beautifully to the present moment. It forces you to stop monkeying around with trivialities and to stop postponing the life you were meant to live. You reclaim your attention, you forge your own character, and you prepare to meet whatever the dawn brings with a defiant smile and an unshakable, fearless heart. You stand at the threshold of your inner citadel and breathe the clean, cold air of your hard-won sovereignty. You have stripped away the artificial desires that once puppeted your limbs, and you have silenced the frantic alarms of a hijacked nervous system. You have learned the immense, terrifying power of simply pausing while the rest of the world screams for a reaction. But as you look out from the high watchtower of your mind, you must realize a profound and inescapable truth. The silence you have cultivated is not a retreat from the world, but the very foundation of your profound connection to it. This fortress was never meant to be a hermitage. Philosophy is not a justification for cold detachment, nor is it a sanctuary where you can hide from the agonizing, messy realities of the human condition. You were not born to be a solitary creature hoarding your peace of mind like a miser counting gold in the dark. You are a social animal, a vital breathing component of a vast and intricately woven cosmic organism. When you step back into the chaotic marketplace of human affairs armed with your newfound restraint, you must look upon the crowds with completely new eyes. You will inevitably encounter people who are selfish, deceitful, arrogant, and cruel. In the past, their noise would have hijacked your emotions, triggering anger, resentment, and a desperate desire to argue back and prove them wrong. Now your pause affords you clarity. You understand that they behave this way out of a terrible blindness. They are stumbling through the dark, lashed by their own unexamined passions, desperately chasing the hollow illusions of wealth, fame, and power, because no one ever taught them the true nature of the good. They are slaves to their impulses, acting involuntarily under the mistaken belief that lashing out will bring them peace. Your judgment of them must dissolve into a fierce and aching compassion. What can the most malicious person do if you continually respond to their provocations with gentle grace, absorbing their frantic energy like a massive stone promontory against which the waves constantly break? The water roars and foams in a deafening frenzy, but the rock stands absolutely still, and eventually the fury of the water settles around it. You realize that to hate them is to hate a part of your own self. Your restraint, therefore, is not passive. It is a coiled spring of potential energy reserved entirely for meaningful action. You draw the circles of your concern closer to your own chest, starting with your own character, and then you extend your rational affection outward to your family, your friends, your local community, and finally, you throw your arms around the entirety of the human race. The world does not need more empty suits or loudmouths debating grand theories in the town square. The world desperately needs people who are willing to do the hard, unglamorous work of holding the line in total self-control. You ask yourself the ultimate question, whether to be or to do. You choose to do. You do your job brick by boring brick. You subsume your ego to the larger mission. You do not need applause. You do not need a parade. When you do something good, you act like the vine producing a cluster of grapes, moving silently on to the next deed without demanding recognition. The answer to why you did the right thing should always be simply because it was the right thing to do. But make no mistake, the path of self-mastery is not a paved highway. It is a rugged ascent through hostile territory. The world is a brutal, indifferent arena that will inevitably break your heart. It will shatter your carefully laid plans. It will take away the people you love without a moment of warning. You will face sickness, betrayal, humiliation, and the agonizing sting of failure. There will be days when the darkness seems absolute, when the impulse to surrender to anger or despair feels overwhelmingly heavy. In those moments, your trained mind allows you to listen to the wisdom of the ancients. When you are knocked to the cold ground bleeding and exhausted, you do not curse the heavens for their unfairness. You do not surrender to the seductive comfort of victimhood. You wipe the dirt from your face. You recognize that the obstacle in your path has just become your actual path, and you stand back up. You practice the art of emotional endurance, filling the cracks of your broken heart with the gold of resilience and wisdom. You demand of yourself the courage to look strife and popular odium in the face with perfect nonchalance. You do not pray for an easy life. You pray for the strength to endure a terrifyingly difficult one with unyielding grace. This brings you to the final terrifying shadow you must confront if you are ever to claim absolute freedom over your emotions. It is the master fear, the invisible terror that drives the frantic consumerism, the tribal hatred, and the desperate, noisy reactions of the modern world. You must face the absolute certainty of your own death. You must look into the abyss of your own non-existence and refuse to blink. You have spent much of your life pretending that you have an endless reservoir of tomorrows. You have lived as if you were immortal, postponing your happiness, your purpose, and your character for a future that is completely unguaranteed. But the truth is that you are dying right now. The time that passed while you read these words belongs to death. Every breath you take is a countdown, a slow biological clock ticking toward a moment you cannot negotiate with, cannot buy your way out of, and cannot escape. You are a fragile vessel of clay containing a few liters of blood, walking blindly on the precipice of eternity. Both Alexander the Great and his mule keeper were brought to the exact same place by death, swallowed up by the endless sweeping tide of time. Walk the long gallery of the past, of empires and kingdoms succeeding each other without number, and you can see the future, for surely it will be exactly the same. Let this realization wash over you, not as a paralyzing terror, but as a violent, electrifying awakening. When you completely strip away the fear of death, every other fear and frustration in your life immediately loses its teeth. What does the opinion of a stranger matter to a dying person? What does a temporary financial loss, a delayed flight, or a bruised ego matter in the face of the infinite cosmic void? Why on earth would you spend your precious, irreplaceable seconds reacting to an insult from someone you do not even respect? Once you accept that your ticket to this magnificent festival of existence has a strict unknown expiration date, the festival suddenly becomes unbearably beautiful. The autumn leaves, the taste of cold water, the touch of a loved one's hand, the quiet satisfaction of a hard day of work, all of it becomes infused with a radiant, urgent glory. You stop sleepwalking. You stop wishing you were somewhere else. You stop reacting to the petty dramas of the world and anchor yourself violently to the present moment, because the present moment is the only thing you actually possess. So stop wandering about in a haze of distraction and self-pity. Stop monkeying around in enough of this miserable, whining life. The philosophical maxims you have studied, the journals you have written, the grand theories of the cosmos you have pondered are entirely worthless if you do not immediately embody them. You are not likely to read your own notebooks or ancient histories or the anthologies you collected to enjoy in your old age. A scholar made is a soldier spoiled if you do not carry your wisdom onto the battlefield of your daily life. You are no longer a student rehearsing in the shadows for a performance that will never arrive. The curtain is up, the lights are blinding. The Olympic Games of your life have already started, and waiting is no longer an option. Let go of your pathetic excuses. Sever the invisible strings of desire, anger, and fear that have jerked you around like a mindless puppet for your entire life. Step fully and unapologetically into the sovereign power of your own reasoned choice. Choose right now to be a person of unbreakable character. Choose right now to stop reacting to the noise of the world and start commanding the silence of your own soul. Get active in your own rescue if you care for yourself at all, and do it while you can. Rise up from the dirt, be brave, be good, and live